Hey guys, welcome to Cup of Joe. Today, I'm so happy to have Joe Rodrigues back for a second cup with us today in the carpenter shop. So Joe, welcome back.
Thank you kindly for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, well, after our last talk, which had a lot of views, the most views of any of our shows, I thought it'd be nice to invite Joe back for a second cup because I have about 101 questions more to ask him. I mean, when you have a Josephologist on the channel, you just want to ask him everything, right? So I've limited myself to only 12 more questions with this modern day apostle of Saint Joseph. So let us jump right in. All right, question number one. Joe, do you think God and his mysterious providence allowed you to have a bad relationship with your earthly father so that you would discover your spiritual father, Saint Joseph?
So that's a very good question, and it's not one that I've really thought of before you mentioned it. Um, it's a bit of a thinker. I would say that possibly yes, because I might not have sought out Saint Joseph's fatherhood if I had a good relationship with my dad, or who knows, maybe if I had a good relationship with my dad, we would both discover St. Joseph together. So it's really hard to tell, but I can definitely say that I believe, God gave me St. Joseph as a consolation, definitely, to have that father figure that I desperately wanted. And, I think, I think even if I did have a good relationship, I probably would discover him, because I think definitely some things have to happen in life. And St. Joseph is one of them. So, I mean, the hardships, looking back, yeah, it sucked pretty bad, but I had a saint for a father figure, so it's more than I could have asked for, I guess. So I'll say yes and no, I guess.
Very good, very good. When you were
Because
talking, as I'm sure some of our viewers are, as you're talking, they're probably thinking about their own relationship with their earthly fathers as well. And as you were talking, I was thinking about my own, and I think my dad's great, but in a similar but different way to yours, I was thinking how, unfortunately, my parents, they divorced when I was like 1 year old. So I grew up without a father, so to speak, in my life. How old was I? Maybe like 5 or 6. The first time I met my dad, and I remember my mom telling me like, oh yeah, he looks like this. And I was like growing up thinking, hey, what does my dad look like? Which is kind of a weird thought for a kid, right? But what happened because of that, since I didn't have my dad physically in my life there, what I did, I kind of, like most kids, rebel. They go kind of the not so good way. Since my mom and stepdad were kind of into some not so great things, I kind of rebelled from that and went the good way. So I like get up in the morning, I go to church by myself. I was like that kid that, who's this kid just come to Sunday school by himself? And so I started reading the Bible, and I just took on God, my heavenly father, as like, my new father, because, my dad's not around. Later in life, I lived with my dad because he lived in a different state. But I just think it's beautiful how God and his mysterious plan allows each of us to have a certain life in a certain way that helps us, or I could say in a negative way, gives us no excuse. I read a little bitty book, like probably the smallest, best book I've ever read, by Saint Alphonsus Liguori, called something like God's Will, Knowing God's Will, or something like that. It's something about God's will. It's just like really thin, super good book. And in it, Saint Alphonsus Liguori says something to the fact of, be happy how you are, the way you are, and where you are. Because he said, if you were a little bit more handsome, you could fall into sin. If you were a little bit richer, you could get distracted with the things of the world. If you were a little bit, poorer, or a little bit uglier, or, this type of thing. And he even said, if it's raining, some people complain, oh, it's raining today. No, thank God it's raining today. it was obviously God's will that it's raining. So we should be happy with God's will. Praise God, it's raining. The grass needs it. It's green, this type of thing. So, even though, as you said in your own words, you had a sucky relationship with your dad, I had a good relationship with my dad, once he came into my life. God can use everything to bring us closer to him. And as in your case, to help you to really discover in a very deep way, as you did, Saint Joseph, your spiritual father. I think that's beautiful. Before my second question, I just want to point out, I don't know if you can see it here, my coffee cup. I'm at a new hotel, and it's a weird thing. It's like, it doesn't really have a true handle. It's like just this thing here. So I hope I don't spill that. All right. So back to our Cup of Joe questions. Number 2, a previous guest on our show. Yeah.
Hold on. Can we rewind a little bit?
Absolutely.
So you kind of touched on something there when you mentioned Alphonsus de Liguori, and about us, not having certain qualities or characteristics that we would have liked to have had, but that could have been our downfall if we did have certain things. That's something I do think about often, because I did have my rebellious years, even though I had St. Joseph in my life. And I think back sometimes, like, I didn't live a very good lifestyle for a while. I was always at the clubs and, getting as drunk as I possibly could and doing whatever else, And I think back, and I'm growing up, I've always had low self-esteem. I've always had body issues. And I think, thank goodness I see myself as kind of like as this repulsive person, because if I didn't have maybe that veil, I would have done so much more, like so many more bad things in my teenage and young adult life. I mean, the bars I went to and stuff, you have people practically taking off their clothes. Like, it wasn't a very moral place. And I'm thinking, man, if I had a good body or good self-image, I'd be right in there with them. I'd be exposing myself. It's like, maybe I would have like tried to do porn. Maybe I would have tried to become a stripper. Who knows, But because of these body issues or self-image issues, it's like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly do that because I don't think I'm good enough for it. But I do think about that sometimes. And I think, thank goodness, thank God that I have certain issues that kept me from sinning more than I already was. So when you mentioned that just now about, having certain benefits or wishing you had this or that, good looks or money. And I guess probably good that I didn't have a lot of what I wanted, because I probably would have abandoned St. Joseph and gone down some terrible path, and then had to have repented much later and embraced him again. So I think God cut out a lot of garbage that I would have been doing. So I was bad, but I was nowhere near as bad as I could have been. And so I always had my faith in there somewhere, leading me along. So anyway, I digress. We can go back to your next question, but I really, gravitated towards what you were saying there.
That's wonderful. Well said. And friends, we didn't really prepare today. We just kind of jumped in here. So this is a little bit of a wing it session. I'll say one last thing. I'll get to number 2. Otherwise, we'll never get all 12 questions in. What you made
We'll
me...
Up then.
Yeah. Well, Joe, you made me think of another thing I heard recently on a show called Where Peter Is by Mike Lewis. We don't think we're related, but anyway, it was a really good show where he actually interviewed, hold on, I'll think of the name, Father James Martin. And on the show, it was him, a lady, and Father James Martin, and they talked about how, the adulterous woman at the well, and how Jesus said something about, your husband, and she says, I have no husband. And he says, you're right. This one's not your husband, or those, 6 other guys. But and the lady on the show, she said something like, wasn't it cool that Jesus came to her? and asked for her water.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus is God, right? He doesn't need her water, but he goes there to this lady who's a sinner. I mean, we're all sinners, right? But I think it's beautiful that he reached her through his weakness, his vulnerability, because being human, he was thirsty. So he went over there. And of course, there's a woman there at, midday, which means she's probably not like the other women who go there at the right time, in the morning when it's cool. So she's an outcast. So she goes in the middle of the day. His apostles didn't even go because, like, hey, you're going to go talk to, I'm not going over there. I'm a good Jew. So, Jesus wasn't afraid to go to the wrong places sometimes. So he went there. And I don't want to scandalize anybody, but in God's mysterious providential plan of love for each of us, somehow, if it wasn't because of her bad past, she wouldn't have been there at the well that day. She wouldn't have been able to meet our Lord. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she was like the first one who said, "You're the Messiah." And she was a Samaritan woman. Like, who, Jesus talking to a Samaritan woman? Didn't he know any better? That's a Samaritan. So I think it's beautiful. Like people like us, the average Joe sinners that we are, that God can use even us as an instrument. Or I would rather say, in the words of St. Joseph, he can even use us as a tool. So Lord, help us to be a tool for you today. All right, question number 2. A previous guest on our show, he mentioned a term that I love. He coined a term, sanctification of the imagination. And as St. Joseph the Worker feast is near, how do you, Joe, imagine Joseph's daily schedule? Like, what time of day do you think he rose? What time would he have set his alarm clock, his morning offering? What times in the day would he lay down the hammer to pray? Or how he prayed as he worked? Or what time he went to bed? What do you think?
So given that that they weren't well off, the Holy Family, and Joseph had to work with his hands, I figure he would get up at sunup, like most men of Nazareth, probably, and he was probably in bed early, early to rise, early to bed, or however that goes. And, same with Our Lady. She was probably up when the sun, farmers, they get up before the sun even comes up. So I'm sure that was the case with workers in Nazareth at the time, because you had a lot of work to do and you only had a certain amount of time to get it done. I believe they prayed together at the start of their days, before setting off to work. The thing is, though, in Nazareth, Joseph's carpenter shop is also in the same building as the Holy Family's house, like the home. It's called the House of the Nutrition, as in, raising Christ and taking care of him and stuff. So he didn't have far to go for work. So it was a short commute. So that's good. And I don't know, I don't know the Old Testament as well as I should. I don't know if they had set times throughout the day for prayer for Jews, but I believe that he prayed while he worked, and not just setting down the hammer to go pray, but praying while he was doing his work, his sawing. And, the clang of the hammer and the saw, like that could almost be white noise to his prayers, a background to his prayers. And, with every wood chip that fell on the ground, that was almost a prayer in itself, So I think he realized God's presence everywhere, not just at certain hours of the day. And and then, at the end of the day, you come home and, your wife is there and you say your prayers before bed and all that. And I wanted to read just a couple excerpts from my book, if that's okay, to show what St. Joseph kind of did.
Well,
So,
sure. And before you do, if you could tell us which book it is, because I have a nice little slide here I can bring up, which will put it in the background. So which book are you talking about, since you've written 3 books, Joe?
Okay. So this is actually the special edition of the last book on your shelf there.
Wow, I like it.
Yeah, the cover with him holding his heart, that's the book of Joseph. So before Jesus was born, This really touched me when Mary was visiting her cousin Elizabeth. She was away, right, for a few months there, and Joseph, sorry, he was back, setting up home for when Mary returned and stuff, and he really, like, his heart really longed for Our Lady while she was gone. Like, he truly loved her. It wasn't just, okay, yeah, see you in 6 months. It was, oh my goodness, how am I going to get by without you for 6 months? And so, according to Mother Cecilia Baj, approved mystic of the church, she said that when Joseph was weary or lonesome, he would retire to the little room that he had set aside for Mary. So I guess he had a separate little bedroom for her. And he would kneel and think about Mary and wonder about what she was doing. And he would actually weep to the point where his guardian angel would have to come and comfort him and console Joseph to let him know that, Mary's fine. She's with Elizabeth, she's helping her through her pregnancy. Like, the angel also told Joseph that Our Lady was praying for Joseph while she was gone. So she was always thinking of him as well. So that's pretty beautiful that way. So, even with all this work to keep him busy, with prayer and work, he still missed Our Lady very lovingly. So I thought that was very beautiful. They kind of bring some emotion to these, saints that we know. Sorry. And there's another thing here I found. So when they were in Egypt, the exile in Egypt, Joseph actually built a house of prayer for the Jews there because there was none. So I found that out from, again, Mother Cecilia Baj, who told us that. And I'll read another thing here. Let's see. St. Joseph worked diligently, but he never failed in his prayers. Sometimes he tired from his strenuous labors and he would come back to Mary. He would tell her how exhausted he was. Then she would place the infant in his arms, and Joseph would receive him with deepest humility, and embracing him, his soul would be filled with joy and consolation. So you have that quote by Jesus, come to me, you who are weary, you who are burdened, right? And this is like a literal interpretation of that. Mary would put Jesus in Joseph's arms, at the end of the day. And it's almost like he was just recharged, like he's holding God incarnate. So of course he's going to receive all this rejuvenation. So, work, yes, was very important, but he was always mindful of those entrusted to his care. And he always missed them and loved them while he was working. So, working and praying. And then at the end of the day, when Jesus is old enough, you'd have the Father instructing Jesus in the books of the Old Testament. St. Joseph's father, Jacob, he read him all the Old Testament stories. And Joseph, as a child, particularly loved the Psalms of David. So I could see Joseph instructing those to Jesus, like helping him to memorize the Psalms every night before bed, by candlelight. And so it shows that he was able to work hard, pray hard, but also spend that quality time with his son, who turned out to be the Son of God. So I think he balanced everything beautifully.
Well said. Well said. And I when you were talking, I thought about how, the sanctification of our imagination, how it can help us to look at some, first century houses and what it would have looked like where they lived, where they slept, where they ate. Steve Ray, a very well-known author, speaker, convert, theologian, in one of his talks, he informed us, which I didn't know, that the people back then in Nazareth, they lived in caves. So kind of like this carpenter shop looking like a cave, it basically was super modest, which is probably a compliment. Not like the houses we have today, which are, by comparison, bling, bling. So it's very modest, like the Holy Family was very modest. So I think it's good we can kind of look at these pictures to help amplify our imagination as we're trying to put ourselves in the scenes, in those biblical scenes. So I think you said that so well. Thank you. All right, question number 4, Joe. Wait a minute. Question number 3. Wow, we're only on number 3. All right, number 3. You say you relate to Joseph, who was overlooked and took him to be your spiritual father. Tell us about this.
Okay, so when I think I mentioned this the last time, when I would go to church. It's funny you mentioned that you would go to church on your own. Just to go back to that a bit, because I did that as well, because my family wasn't religious, and so anyway, I would look at this image of Saint Joseph, who's supposed to be important, but he was forgotten by everybody, and um, I gravitated towards that because, I mean, here was a man who he did nothing wrong. He was a good guy, and yet people always overlooked him and went to the next guy. It's like the underdog. And that's pretty much how I was, because growing up, I didn't really fit in with any particular group of people at school. Like, I wasn't a jock, I wasn't gothic, I wasn't smart, I wasn't a nerd. So I was kind of a misfit, and I didn't quite know where I belonged. And it seems that for a while in the church, it seems like the church didn't quite know what to do with Saint Joseph.
Mm.
Yes, he was important in that, but it's like, oh, well, we don't want to distract from Our Lady and our Lord, but we have to have him somewhere. But it seems like he was always misplaced somewhere. And
Joe,
he was,
if I can interrupt you for a second, because I'll probably forget. I love what you just said. And I hope that someday they add it to the litany of Saint Joseph, a new title, Patron of Misfits, and maybe another one, Patron of Underdogs. That's so beautiful.
yeah, absolutely. And I lost my train of thought now.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, and but I felt like I could fit in with Joseph as like a fellow misfit or underdog. And it's like, okay, well, we're both kind of in the dark here. Let's, we'll be buddies then, and like growing up too in my family, like I was the firstborn, and then my brother came along, and I don't know, he probably won't watch this, but he was the favorite, and he knows he was a favorite, I'm sure, but. It seems like I was always ridiculed for my faith growing up by my father. I remember I'd be drawing in my room, a picture of Our Lady, and he'd come in and he was yelling one day, what have the saints ever done for you? And just getting mad and mad. Why can't you be normal like other kids your age? And that I was so sad, because I'm like, I didn't feel I did anything wrong to warrant such hostility. And so that just kind of pushed me more to Saint Joseph, who, I wouldn't say he was a reject, but he understood, I think, not being understood. And so that was very important for me. And even in, did I tell you about when I was teaching catechism?
No.
And that lady? Okay. So I was teaching catechism one day, years later, decades later at this church. And after the lesson, this young lady comes to me and was just curious about what I taught the kids that day. And I said, oh, I taught them about Saint Joseph today. Today was our Saint Joseph. And she was puzzled. She's like, who's Joseph? And I said, well, okay, he's husband of the Virgin Mary. You see him every Christmas in the nativity scene in the creche,
holding his stick.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, Joseph, I didn't know he was a saint. And I'm thinking, honey, are you serious? So, but that just, again, that's why I gravitate. People didn't understand him. They still don't understand him. And I was never understood, and so he was always a great comfort to me, and I think he absolutely could be the patron of the underdog, because no one gave him enough credit. Oh, also there was a movie called, I'm not going to remember it now. Anyway, there was this movie about this kid who had this condition where he was very small. And anyway, they're doing a Christmas pageant, and they're picking roles, like who's going to be the Virgin Mary, who's going to be the shepherds. And the teacher's like, hey, who wants to be Joseph? And then the kid's like, nobody wants to be Joseph. He didn't do anything,
Well, it'd be easy if you were Joseph, it would be really easy to memorize your lines.
Yeah. You got no lines to memorize. That's awesome. But I remember when I saw that, I thought, what? Like, I was kind of mad at the TV. I'm like, you shut your mouth. He did so much for the Holy Family, But story of his life, right? Like, he's always overlooked and stuff, and he's not the popular guy. So that's
I,
part of what attracted me to him.
I love that. And I love how, you relate to him in that way, as I think many people do. And I put up this cool modern icon that you have in your book of, like, Saint Joe, the average Joe saint, who gives us all hope that we can become a saint, because, he's like, in a sense, your average guy who's living with the Holy Family. And I mean, so I think in a way, Saint Joseph is kind of like in this image holding open his flannel shirt, like Mama Mary would open up her mantle. So he's opened up, his flannel shirt, saying, "Hey, come on in, my spiritual sons and daughters. We're the average Joe gang. I'm the patron of misfits." So I think that's so beautiful, and I think it'll speak to a lot of hearts out there. My next question, Joe, is you mentioned that in your faith journey that Our Lady of Fatima was very instrumental and key. So can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So as a child, I was really oh, I'm going to start coughing again. I'm really sorry.
Sorry, friends. Joe has a cold. He's been drinking some cough syrup. So he said he drank some cough syrup before the show to kind of keep his voice lubricated. So my apologies.
Yeah, I've been sick for like 4 weeks with this. Anyway, when I was a kid, I loved art. And I remember flipping through, like, my grandmother and grandfather are Portuguese. So of course there was always a statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and I'd ask, well, who's this? And who are these 3 little kids there kneeling? And Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia. And I kind of had a kid's understanding of the story. But I remember one day I was flipping through my other grandparents' Bible. It was a French Bible, and there was a picture of Our Lady of Fatima. Now, it wasn't the exact statue at the Capellina, the famous one, but it was a replica. But anyway, this statue was so beautiful, and I just fell in love with Our Lady right there. Like, when I saw this image, I felt so, oh, I got shivers now. I felt so good, looking at this. She was beautiful. And so because I always had a problem with understanding who God the Father was and who Jesus was, so I started getting into learning about Our Lady. I'm like, who's this beautiful woman, and then you get into the Rosary. By getting into the Rosary, you get into Jesus. You learn about his life story, and this mother is guiding you along the way to learn about her son, and that's how it started. I mean, once I fell in love with her. I remember my grandparents had a big statue of Our Lady of Grace, and at the head of my bed, there was a shelf, and I used to grab this big statue and put her on the headboard right above my head when I was sleeping. So when I'd look up, I'd see her looking down on me. And, it probably could have fallen over and crushed me. It was a big statue, but I just loved staring up at Our Lady who was staring down at me. And excuse me, years later, I think it was 2004, around Christmas, I had a crisis of my faith, where I think this was around the time of the Da Vinci Code and all that stuff, where everyone was questioning, oh, well, Jesus wasn't really God, and all the scandalous stuff. And I had a brief, maybe couple weeks or a month, where I realized, I don't think I believe that Jesus is God. I don't think I believe in anything anymore. It's like my world just shattered at that time. And I remember I was cleaning my apartment. I was throwing out a bunch of pamphlets and papers and scraps and stuff. And I came across a little booklet from the Fatima Center, the Fatima Crusader magazine. And I was going to chuck it like everything else, but something said just to flip through it, And so I'm flipping through it. And next thing I know, I'm rereading the whole story of Fatima again. And by the time I got to the miracle of the sun on October 13th, suddenly it's like everything flooded back to me, where, what? Yes, God is real. Yes, he loves you. Yes, Jesus died for your sins. Yes, Our Lady loves you. And St. Joseph was there too at the miracle. He was there for you. And suddenly I believed, and I got more shivers now, praise God. But I just felt so relieved, I'm like, okay, I do matter. there is a God. I do matter, that Our Lady does love me. There is something bigger than myself out there. And so because of that magazine of Our Lady of Fatima, everything came back to me in like this big water, this flood of love. And I actually have her right here because I knew you'd ask about her. And so I wanted her to be on camera for a bit. I
So
absolutely
nice. Wow.
love Our Lady. Yeah. So that's the story of Our Lady of Fatima. She kind of brought me into the faith to begin with. And then when I fell away for a bit, she's the one who brought me back in again. Like she wasn't going to let me go, So I owe a lot to Our Lady of Fatima and Saint Joseph for bringing me back to the faith.
That's what a mother always does, and I think that's so beautiful, particularly for our friends who are maybe Protestant, because our Orthodox friends, they would understand, they'd get this, right? But for some of our Protestant friends, maybe not so much like Anglicans or Lutherans, but the rest, maybe like some Baptist friends or some type of evangelical friends, they just don't get like, well, why do you guys put so much importance on Mary? She's just some woman, anybody could be her. Well, not really. I mean, God picked her out of all the women of history. But the thing is, Mary always brings us closer to Jesus. And like you're, getting ready to just say, okay, forget about, all this Christianity stuff. Forget about you, Jesus. I'm just going to be a Judas. But Mama Mary showed up, in the form of that, image that you saw, reminding you about your roots and, what's true. And in her
I'll have
very
to send you
gentle,
that
motherly
link.
way, she brought you back to Jesus. And that's why, as Catholic Christians, we like to have Mama Mary there and Saint Joseph to keep us on the road with Jesus and to Jesus. So with that said, my next question brings us back to the other side, Saint Joseph, our other training wheel, so to speak, on this path of Christ. What kind of disciplinarian do you think that Father Joseph was? I mean, did Jesus ever have to hide from Joseph?
No, I don't believe Jesus had to hide from him. I think that's an interesting relationship we have with Jesus and Joseph for a couple reasons. Because, A, Joseph isn't the biological father, and B, Jesus is God the Son, the second person of the Most Holy Trinity. So I actually found a good quote that kind of talks about their relationship, and I don't think Jesus got into trouble. I mean, he's God, I think he was a perfect son, and although Jesus did respect Joseph's authority. So I'm just going to read this real quick. It's from Origen of Alexandria. He said that Jesus understood that Joseph was greater than he in age, and therefore he gave him the honor due to a parent. Joseph understood that Jesus, who was subject to him, was greater than he, and that out of reverence, Jesus restrained his authority. So each one should realize that often a lesser man is put in charge of a better man. Sometimes it happens that he who is subject is better than he who appears to be in authority. Once someone who enjoys a higher position understands this, he will not be lifted up in pride by the fact that he is greater. He will know that a better one is subject to himself, just as Jesus was subject to Joseph. So I think their relationship was a good one because they knew their roles. And, Joseph was given the graces. Okay, yes, this might be my God right here, but he gave me the authority over him on this earth. So I have to stand up and take this role that God has given me. And then you have Jesus, God the Son, who is under the care of one of his own creation. So it's humility on both parts and a deep respect for one for the other, respect for the creator and respect for the creation. So I don't think Jesus ever hid from Joseph. They were just always in tune, and I think they worked together, building sites, and probably traveled a lot together on their own, and with Our Lady back at home. And it's unfathomable the relationship they would have had, and how much love there was between the two, and it takes a lot of humility. It takes a big man to tell God what to do. So a lot of respect and props to Joseph there, and vice versa.
Well, Joe, I think that was wonderful. That quote that you read was probably the quintessential quote for servant leadership. And today in many Christian circles, you hear that beautiful term, is we're all as men particularly called to be, not some kind of dictator leader, my way or the highway, but as, leaders, maybe at our job, at our work, and especially at home, we are each called to be servant leaders. And I never thought about this until you read that quote that, wow, Joseph, here again, shows up. He is the quintessential servant leader because he knew that the one that he was leading was, I mean, anything I say is going to not be right, but he was, I mean, way above him. But even saying that, Jesus is way above Joseph is super understatement because it's God, right? But somehow in that, I think we need to chew on that to, like the Bible says, always think of others as better than yourself. So if we're put in a leadership position, we should still see those below us as better than us. And how can we serve you better? What can I do if I'm a leader? What can I do to serve you? It's not me telling you what to do. It's me. How can I be a better boss? That's beautiful. And I love your devotion to St. Joseph. You always bring up so many new ways of thinking about Joseph. And with that in mind, what is your number one favorite devotion to St. Joseph and why?
So my favorite devotion is actually the Little Office of St. Joseph. In the Catholic Church, I think there's only like 5 approved little offices for private and public use, but the Little Office of St. Joseph has all the hours, like every 3 hours you read, these prayers, and there's a hymn in there, and it's just a good way to keep Joseph as part of your everyday life. And I find that when I don't do it, I'll confess right now, I haven't done it in about 2 weeks. And I used to do it every single day, like clockwork. It becomes a part of your day. You're sharing with Joseph your day, and you're contemplating his daily life when he was here. And I find, I hope to get back into it starting tomorrow, I swear. But I find when I have that, it's a nice rhythm and routine to my day. And, every 3 hours, it's like, okay, I get to regroup and ground myself and pay homage to my saint. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I love this saint or I love that saint. I got all their statues, I got all their novena prayers printed out. But you have to cultivate that prayer life with that saint. And the Little Office of St. Joseph for me does that. And I don't think it's in the regular edition of my book, but it is in the special edition here. All the pages are earmarked in my copy because I used it so often. And again, it's just a beautiful way of contemplating this man who is a saint, who is the father of Christ, but who is also your own patron saint. He's living your day with you. My second favorite devotion is actually a devotion that I kind of came up with. It's called the Little Chaplet of St. Joseph. I composed a Hail Joseph prayer that's, it's the same rhythm of the Hail Mary, and I have mysteries and everything. That's also in my books. It's just another take on the rosary, I guess, but definitely the Little Office.
You also have a video of it on your YouTube channel, correct?
Yes, I have 3 videos for the joyful, sorrowful, and glorious mysteries of St. Joseph. It takes about 20 minutes to say.
Yeah, and friends, I would invite you to check it out. I prayed that with a friend of mine who's also kind of like me and, away from his family. So we have, we're like prayer buddies, wingmen. He's also a pilot. And we prayed your, Rosary of St. Joseph, and it was really nice. We really liked it. What about the Little Office? Do you have a video on that as well?
I do. I have a video for every hour of the Little Office of St. Joseph on my channel. So people can look that up as well. So cool. It starts at 6 a.m. So it starts at 3 a.m. and then you got 3 and then 6 and then 9 and then 12 and da. So yeah, they're all there individually.
Did you say 3 a.m.?
Yeah.
So you have to wake up at 3 a.m.?
Well, okay, matins, like here, Matins is 12 midnight or 3 a.m. But you got to think though, the people who usually pray like little offices and stuff would be monks, right? And monks get up at 3 in the morning usually, you know. Depends what order, but some orders they get up like 3 a.m. before the sun rises, you know, and then it ends at 9 p.m. So from 9 till 3 a.m. I guess you're sleeping. And yeah, I never do. Well, you know, sometimes I'm still up at 3 a.m. So I'll start it at 3 a.m. But if not, you know, I'll start it in the morning and I'll combine hours together, like maybe 3 and 6 a.m. together, if I don't get up at 3. But yeah, so if you miss an hour, it's okay to combine two, like to do them both together, side by side.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So Joe, what do you think about the term I coined, Theotata? Can it work?
I love it. Yes, I love it.
So,
we were talking about
it's
that
not
before.
heresy, right?
No, not at all. I think it's a very, it's a very, it's like a father calling a son calling his father, you know, Theotata. Like it's got a humility to it. It's beautiful. And again, we were talking about this before, where in the Philippines there's Tata Hosep. You know, it's like a childlike reverence for the father. So I absolutely Theotata, yeah, that should be on shirts and all sorts of stuff, like Theotata. Get people talking about it, because you know, Theotokos, yes, we understand God bearer, but then Theotata, like that's when you first mentioned that, again, like I said, I had to Google it because I didn't know what it was, but there was nothing about it. So I think maybe you're onto something as the first person to coin that phrase. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. So
well, thank you. I doubt it, because you know, every time we think we've invented something new, you found out there's like some guy like 1,000 years ago already thought about that. So I'm sure it's somewhere. Like I don't have, you know, there's a really good program which I don't have because it's like super crazy expensive if you get the full deluxe version, but it's called Verbum. And I guess it's like, you know, the Library of Alexandria on your phone. My friend Steve Ray, he sent me an email about it and said, you got to get this. And I was like, yeah, I want to get it. And then I saw the price. And my wife was like, no, you're not getting that. It's like, what about for Christmas and my birthday? But anyway, it has like, I guess, every, you know, Bible version known to man, every like, you know, church father book, every, you know, encyclopedia all together. And you just like search a word, in this case, maybe like Theotata, and see if it's there. But yeah, for friends that don't know what this word means, Theo, of course, means God. Like, you know, Theotokos for Mary, she's the God bearer, or the mother of God. So Theotokos means mother of God, or maybe more literally, God bearer. So Theotata, Theo again meaning God, and Tata meaning daddy or raiser. So Joseph would have been, I think, the raiser of God. I mean, he raised God the Son. Like, who can say that? Only him, right? You know, he raised the Savior. Like, I mean, come on. If you got, I mean, he's the only guy in heaven that can have that T-shirt. You know, number one dad and raiser of the Savior. So, thank you. I didn't know that about the Philippines. A friend of ours who lives in Croatia mentioned on her Facebook. They were friends of ours. Her husband also, he unfortunately passed away with a heart attack. She put a lovely, you know, memorial on her Facebook saying something like, "We miss you, Tata." It's like, Tata? That's that ancient Greek and ancient Sanskrit word I just discovered. Why is she using it? You know, and so I found out in Croatia, they also use that word. So yeah, and then I asked a monk friend, he's 80 years old, Father Matthew Habiger. He was on our show. Fantastic gentleman. Super smart. He's got like, I don't know, 3 or 4 degrees. So I figured, okay, I'll ask him my question. And he said, I don't know. Let me ask, you know, brother and so who's like a Greek scholar. So brother so-and-so checked it out. And he's like, that works. He's like, wow, John, how'd you discover that? I said, I don't know. So it's, I think God has a really wonderful sense of humor that he can just, you know, sometimes pick some nobody who doesn't know any better, who stumbles upon like this really cool thing. And, you know, and like in my industry, aviation, we have what's called CRM, crew resource management or cockpit resource management. And so one of the mottos is, it's not who's right, but what's right. So it doesn't matter who, discovers these things. It's just, what's right or what's not. And then we kind of all can learn from each other and, in the body of Christ. So cool. All right, next question. And we're running out of time here, so I better pick up the pace. Question number
Already?
8. Yeah. Have you ever thought of becoming a priest? And do you think Joseph did?
Okay, so I'll start with St. Joseph first. Um, in all the research I've done for my books, I don't see any indication that he actually went out to try to become a priest or put much thought in. Like, I think he probably thought of it here and there, like a lot of young men do, but then he probably didn't feel that was his vocation, his calling. He probably didn't feel good enough to be a priest, honestly, with the amount of humility in him. I feel he probably just thought he wasn't good enough. But again, God obviously gave him those, instincts, because he got even better. He became the father of God the Son, the virgin father of God the Son. So a higher vocation than even the priesthood. But me, I thought about it for many years as a kid, as a teenager, and in my early 20s. And but then I started wondering, well, is this what I want or what God wants? And my father, one day, he found out that that I had these feelings wanting to be a priest. Someone told him, and he let me have it. So that kind of pushed it away from me. And then I thought, well, maybe I could be a monk. So I actually looked into being a Capuchin monk many years later when I was on my own. And again, it didn't work out. So I'm thinking,
Sorry, Joe, my connection's not so good. Did you say a cappuccino monk?
a Capuchin, yes. That's where cappuccino gets its name, from the color.
Exactly. I
Color,
love that Catholic drink, cappuccino.
yes, it's the color of their robes. So that's so cool. So I did think about that. It didn't pan out. So I'm thinking, all right, I have a different calling. Also, at this point in my life, I've done a lot of things that would probably exclude me from the priesthood or being a monk or whatever. And I have to embrace maybe a celibate lifestyle just as a layman. So I'm still kind of discerning that part of it now. But I did think, long story short, yes, I did think of it. No, I didn't pursue it. I go
Well,
on and on. I'm told.
I think I think it's fitting because Saint Joseph, being an average Joe, he was a layman. He was not a priest. And it was a little bit of a loaded question, because I also happen to know recently I discovered that he couldn't have even been a priest if he wanted to, because back then only the guys that were of the house of Levi, were priests. He was of the house of David, just like Mary and Jesus, of course. So he was more like King David. So he was a hidden king. Now, of course, King David's also kind of like a priest, because there's two types of priests, right? There's the what would you call it, the juridical type of priest, the Levites, and then there's the royal priesthood, because we're all priests, right? So he would have been the priest in the sense of like the head of the family, the father of the family. So in that sense, he was a priest. But in the ceremonial type, nope, he couldn't have been, because he wasn't of the tribe of Levi. He was, in a sense, a layman like us. Okay, so
And
question number 10.
had the throne not been usurped, I mean, Joseph was in line for the royal title of king. I mean, Saint Francis de Sales goes on about that, like how he had this title, he had the blood, he just didn't have the crown, right?
Yeah,
So
he was like Dr. Brant Petrie. He has a whole like audio book on this, which I learned about in a talk by Matthew Leonard, which I want to get, called Joseph the Hidden King, and how he had the royal blood coursing through his veins, and he was truly the king of Israel. But that guy Herod, the imposter king, just like in that Lord of the Rings show, right? So that's how humble Joseph was. He was a king, royal king, and he's working in a carpenter shop, happily, rolling up his sleeves and getting his hands dirty and pounding on wood and nails all day, when this imposter guy is sitting on the golden throne over in the palace, right? So I think we can learn something very deep right there. So question number
Definitely.
10, Joe, is it true you went broke publishing and distributing your book? I mean, if that's true, it really breaks my heart, bro. And I'm sure also St. Joseph's heart. Um, and I know
Yeah.
that St. Joseph wants to increase your work and your bank account, at least not to be broke. So can you speak to this? Is this rumor true? And how's your financial state now?
So what happened was when I first did this book, um, you send it out to publishers, the manuscript, you send it to like Tan Publishing or Sophia Press or whatever, all these book publishers, and nobody wanted it. So what I did was, this was before I found out, or this is before Amazon was doing self-publishing for residents in Canada. So I was going to like a Canadian printer press with the manuscript for them to print these books, right? That I would then buy from them. And, I would sell a few copies here and there, but like 90% of those books, I would end up just giving away to people because, a lot of people would say, oh, I can't afford it right now. And I'm like, I get that, hard times. I'm like, here, have a book. And next thing I know, it's like 90% of my stock was given away. And I have a habit of doing that because I'm never going to get rich being an author. I have something to say. I want to share my saint with everybody. I want people to understand him. And you give free copies away. You have to. I mean, otherwise the excuse is, well, I can't afford it. It's like, okay, well, here you go. Now you have no excuse not to know who this man is. So over the years I've been doing that. I mean, even now I still, I'll still give away copies and stuff. But now what I do once in a while now though is I'll advertise like free PDF copies of the book, so I could just email it to them. That way it doesn't cost me anything. But like for me personally, I like having something tangible in my hands that I can feel and smell and flip through. So and like it wasn't just St. Joseph books. I mean, I commissioned statue of him that I gave away. I made St. Joseph care packages for people with like a chaplet, a book, a statue, and scapular. And I'd send these like to the Philippines, to South America. And sometimes I could raise funds for this. Like sometimes people would chip in, but most of the time it was just me. And like I'm the stupidest salesman because I give all my stuff away. Not to promote that people got to come to me now and ask for free stuff, because honestly, I was homeless a couple months ago, and a lot of people online really stepped up to the plate and started donating to a Give, Send, Go page that I started that someone suggested I do. So I'm still unemployed despite looking, and so book sales is all I have right now, and they're not doing so great. But you know what? God will provide, just like he provided for the Holy Family. I know he'll provide for me because he has so far, and it's just about getting the message out. So again, if anyone out there is writing any works, religious works, and you can't find a publisher, just do it on your own, and you can still get it out there for people. Now Amazon has a self-publishing thing where they pay you percentage, they do all the shipping, everything. So it's an easy way to get the word out there of your work that you're passionate about. So that's another thing too. I'm very passionate about St. Joseph. It's not about money. It never was. It couldn't be. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, amen. And I pray that, through the intercession of St. Joseph, that your financial state will increase. And I would like to ask everyone who's listening now, maybe there's, a millionaire or a billionaire out there who's watching right now, and he has a devotion to St. Joseph, and, maybe he would like to support you, an apostle of St. Joseph. So if so, how can they get in touch with you to support your ministry?
Well, excuse me. On my website, I have a donation button there. www.beatejoseph.wixsite.com/main. You can probably put it in the description for people because they probably don't know how to spell all that. Pop quiz for you. I have a question. The name of my apostolate, what does it mean in English, John?
It's funny. It's funny you should say that. And thanks for putting me on the spot, because I actually just looked at that yesterday. And I thought, do I even know what that means? So, okay, so I'm like you, I'm more of a tactile learner, so I have to have it in my hand. So let's see, say it again, I'll write it down and I can decode it.
All right, ad, A-D.
Yeah,
Next word, T-T-E.
yeah,
Next word, Beate,
yeah.
B-E-A-T-E. Ioseph, I-O-S-E-P-H.
Okay, so I think it means ate. Uh, Joseph means
Ad.
Joseph. Beate, I'm not quite sure, but I think it means go to good Joseph.
It means to thee, O blessed Joseph.
Blessed. Okay, so to
So,
thee, blessed Joseph.
so a follow-up question. Where did I get that title?
I would guess that you got it from a saintly pope who maybe included it in one of his prayers.
Yes, very good, very good. Pope Leo the 13th gave us a prayer called what? To thee, O blessed Joseph, to be
Ah,
recited at the
oh yes,
end of the rosary.
that's
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
the thing is, so he composed the St. Michael prayer, but he didn't instruct the faithful to add it to the rosary, but a lot of people do. A couple years later, he wanted reinforcements, Pope Leo the 13th, because the Vatican was under attack. He wanted all the help he could get. So he composed this prayer, to thee, O blessed Joseph, with the specific instruction that it be added to the conclusion of the rosary. And he even indulgenced the prayer to encourage people to pray it. Now, he first did it so that people would pray it in October, the month of the rosary, at the end of the rosary. But I figure in this day and age, you know what, it's got to be October every day because we need all the help we can get now. So, a lot of people who might not be devoted to St. Joseph, you can still include him in your rosaries because I'm sure a lot of people are devoted to the rosary. So add that onto the end of your rosaries. You'll get indulgences. You'll be helping bring grace to the church and to yourself. It's a very militant prayer, kind of like the St. Michael one. So to thee, O blessed Joseph, very important that we pray that at the end of our rosaries.
And friends, Joe's right. It's a really good prayer. At the end of a rosary with my friend Brad that we prayed together, we included that prayer at the end. And in Brad's words, he said, that's a good prayer. That's a manly prayer right there. He said, that's a perfect ending to the rosary. And I can't agree more. So Joe, I would ask at the end of this video, if you could maybe please post the prayer in the comments section so people can get a hold of that, copy paste it to their phone. It's not one you're going to be able to memorize overnight, I assure you, but it's a really good prayer. But if you got it handy in your phone at the end of the rosary, you can just pull that out and pray it. It's a really nice way to include Joseph at the end of the rosary, which I'm sure our Mother Mary would be tickled pink about, or maybe I should say tickled blue about. All right,
Yes.
the next
And,
question is, because we're 6 minutes over, so I gotta pick up the pace. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. All right, so next question is number 11. Speak to us about Saint Joseph, patron of the church pushover. I'm sorry. I mean the church militant, and how you once said in one of your talks that we need to be more aggressive in our faith and thereby conquer the demons that besiege us.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when the church gives St. Joseph a title, they're not just honorary titles with no meaning. I mean, nowadays, you could be a knight by the Queen Elizabeth for not doing anything, and St. Joseph is given the title Terror of Demons, patron of the church. Now, these aren't just nice accolades for him to add to his collection. These are responsibilities entrusted to St. Joseph. So when we sit around and we see, the church is going through so much trouble inside and out, and there's all this confusion, and you're not doing anything, shut up. If you're not doing anything to help, shut up. We do have things we can do. We can pray for help for the church. St. Joseph is given the title patron of the church. So, arrow pointing to St. Joseph, pray to him for the church, which is entrusted to his care. Terror of demons. That sounds really cool, but unless you invoke him as the terror of demons, he's not gonna do anything against the free will of people. Like, if you need help fighting demons, you have to ask. And you have to ask for the church, which is always under attack. And I say, church militant, that's what they say we are. But how many of us actually have that mindset, militant? I mean, we look at some other faiths or some other denominations even where they are passionate about their church. They will fight, you know what I mean? But then you pan over to the Catholic Church, and the image people get is old ladies praying the rosary in a church by themselves. No, we are all called to be prayer warriors. Saint Joseph, the terror of demons, a patron of the church, we have to invoke him. And that's why it's important to add that prayer to the O Blessed Joseph, to the rosary, because by doing that, we are invoking him, not just to protect the church, but also each and every one of us. So it's like a twofold prayer. And just as he, rescued the child Jesus from deadly peril, so too will he rescue the church from the snares of the enemy. Like we talk about Saint Michael, taking care of the devil and the demons, helping us. Saint Joseph does the same thing. It's just we need to ask him. We need to, you need to beg, to petition him to help the church, and to pray for the popes and the bishops and everybody, because we're always going to be under attack, And
Amen. Amen. Well,
sorry, going too long. Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. I think I've hit a passion point of yours. So that's why I wanted to ask you that question. And I'm very like-minded. I think this is, I'm happy that we're living in such a time as this where, St. Joe has showed up when we have such a dearth of men, of fathers, of husbands who don't want to be manly. And I think we need a time to become manly again, manly Christians, like our grandfathers were and their grandfathers, because it seems like now it's more like the church effeminate. And Leon Poodles, funny his last name, Leon Poodles wrote a book by that title, The Church Effeminate. Now, I haven't read the book yet, but I read an article about it, and it seems like it's right up this alley where, we need to see, well, how did the church become effeminate? And like you said, just, ladies at church. And that's why I think, and if you look at the saints, they were not like that. Some of the ones that come to mind, like St. Louis de Montfort. One of my more modern favorite saints is St. Jose Maria Escriva, which I think he's got a perfect name, right? Because it basically means like St. Joseph, Mary. And, if you read his little book, The Way, he is some very manly stuff in there. He just punches you right between the eyes and says, this is how it is, suck it up, be a man, follow Christ. And, when we're confirmed, not so much anymore, but some people still call it, soldier of Christ. So when you're confirmed, you become a soldier of Christ, and you should go out and, try to conquer the world. I was at a retreat by Miles Christi, which is a fantastic religious order. They started in Argentina, but in the US, I think they're based in Michigan, and they have this weekend silent exercises retreat. And I like to, these are young priests. They wear, the traditional cassock, and I like to call them Marines and cassocks. They, like Mother Teresa, they only have two clothes, the one they're wearing and then, tomorrow's. And those guys are just really like Marines. They go anywhere, preach Christ, and they say, hey, there's two banners. There's the banner of Christ, there's the banner of Satan. Pick one. It's like, hey, lead, follow, or get out of the way. And like you just said, shut up, show up, or get out of here. So we have to have a little bit of that testosterone. And I think St. Joseph has showed up just in time to give us that much needed shot of testosterone that our church effeminate needs today. And I know I'm probably going to get finally some good comments down below saying, what are you saying? Some women might say, oh, that's not very polite or something. And I think that most women would agree with me, the ones that may not be, women's liberation, which was anything but liberating. You think the birth control pill liberated you? No, it put you in bondage. By the way, friends, did you know that the birth control pill originally started for men? Yeah, that's right, in Puerto Rico, but it had this bad effect that it would make men's testicles get smaller. Can't have that, right? Not in a male-driven doctor field. So they shipped this onto women. They put the birth control pill onto women. Now, never mind that it killed women in the early stages. So they kept lowering the dosage so that it wouldn't kill as many. And they just said, hey, just put it on women. That's not women's liberation. So anyway, another side topic, don't get me started. But yeah, I agree 100% with you.
Can I
Our
just
last
quickly say
question,
something?
Joe. Pardon?
Can I quickly say something on that?
Please shut me up.
I know we're running out of time, but I don't want to leave it. So going back to the church effeminate, I'm going to give an example. Most churches I go to, okay, the greeters are women, the readers are women, the Eucharistic ministers are women, the parish council members are women, the catechism coordinators are women. It is the only man in most of the churches I've been to is the priest. And it seems that some people, some women, maybe the women's lib ones like you're talking about, some of them only want the priest there for the consecration, and that is it, and for confession. They are taking over the churches. But why are they doing that? Because the men are not standing up to take their place in the church. You have, I mean, technically in the Bible, it says, like, you know, women shall keep their heads covered and will be silent in the temple, because you have to have reverence for the priest who's doing, you know, his duty. But women are taking over because men aren't standing up to the plate. You know, they say, oh, that's women's stuff, church stuff, you know. It's like, no, it's very much, you know, males are supposed to be leaders, you know, to care for their families, to be the high priests of their families. I knew a couple where the woman was always trying to get everyone to go to church, and she always did the blessing at meals. And I'm thinking, no, like, your husband should be stepping up and taking his place as a father and husband in the family, which is like a church, right? Domestic church. So, I mean, men let this happen. They got lazy, and now that we have women running the churches, we really do. And, you know, now they're talking about women deacons. I bet you it'll happen one of these days, because there's not going to be any men who want to be deacons, you know. And I hope that's not the case, because traditionally that's not their place, but we won't get into that. But I'm just saying, yes, men have to step up to the plate now and take their place in the church domestic and the church like as we know it. So, and we have to support our priests, because there's so many innovators out there who want women to take over their jobs, you know, and push them to the side and say, we don't need you anymore. You know, I'm a woman, I'm strong, I'm powerful, you know. And so it emasculates our priests and men in the churches. So it's a negative image that we need to fix with the help of Saint Joseph. Again, the rosary is seen as a very feminine prayer, because you always see old ladies praying it. Man up, pick up your rosary and pray. You know, simple as that.
Well, Joe, I think there's so much on this one point. We probably could have a whole nother show on just this topic. And I think we should, if you're interested to come back for just that topic. I had another guest on by the name of Scott Smith, and Scott, you know, holds many hats: lawyer, engineer, author, and he's in a field what I like to call evangelization to men. And again, this is such a perfect time where Joseph is helping us in the field of evangelization. Now, Jesus could have picked, you know, 6 men apostles and 6 women apostles, but he didn't. Why did he pick only 12 men? Simple. Women are better. Yeah, I said that. Women are better. Men, we're lazy bums most of the time. So I'm sure that our Lord figured, if I can get the weaker sex, you know, to man up here, and the women will follow naturally, because, you know, God made man, and then out of a semi-intelligent human being, he created his masterpiece. And we know it's his masterpiece because Adam looked at it and said, whoa, man, wow, you know? So that's why woman's called woman. Women are just better. The greatest saint is a woman, Mary. The second greatest saint way down here is average Joe, Saint Joseph, which is awesome, but still, I mean, so that puts it in perspective. So we're not saying men are better, far from it. Men are actually worse. Okay, now it makes some men mad, I don't care. But that's why God picked men to be apostles. That's why God picked men to be priests. So I think I'll have to invite you back on this one topic, and we can kind of flesh it out a bit more and talk, because this is something that you're right. When I lived in Egypt, you know, a Muslim country, I was very impressed with how many men went to the mosque. I mean, it was like a manly religion, and they were really impressed with me. They're like, "Oh, you pray?" Like, "Yeah, I pray." Like, "Oh, you're good man, good man." So in their culture, it's like, it's cool, honorable if you're a man of faith. I mean, they didn't say, "Oh, you're Christian, we don't like you." They're like, for them, okay, you're a man of faith, you pray, good man. So for them, it was good. And for them, it was a manly thing, a good thing, a noble thing, just to go to, well, not church, but to go to mosque. So I thought, wow, how they got so many men? And, at our church, it's like half empty and there's just mostly women and children. Where are the guys? And if you look at the Barnum studies, it's a great group, a Christian group that does all this research. And with statistics, here's the cold hard facts. If only mom goes to church, the kids, when they grow up, they're like, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's really low. It's like, I don't know, 8 or 10% likely to go to church themselves. If dad goes to church every Sunday, the kids are like 80 or 90% likely to go to church when they become adults. Why? I don't know. We can talk about that, but the facts are that if the dad does not go to church, the kids probably won't either when they're adults. Why? Because the dad images God the Father, just like Joseph imaged God the Father. So I think it's a beautiful topic, and we're out of time, Joe. So I'm sorry. So I have to hit you with this last 2-part question. So here it comes. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. The last one's a doozy. It's a 2-part question. You said that our era is like a renaissance of Saint Joseph. So it's like a renaissance period. So in church history, and I think that's so true. Speak to this, please. And also, perhaps partly paradoxically, how can Saint Joseph, a master of simplicity, teach us how to simplify our lives?
Okay, so yes, it is a it is a renaissance in church's history, a renaissance of Saint Joseph, because now you have, a million artworks coming out by contemporary artists. You have all these songs being composed. You have people reading, consecrating themselves in mass numbers to this man that was largely forgotten for so long. So it definitely is a renaissance. It's a rebirth, right? So we have art, we have literature, we have music, we have so much. We have the spirit of Saint Joseph in us now, and definitely it's a renaissance. And I hope it'll carry on for forever. Like, I think Mary is a given with us. So should Saint Joseph. So keep building him up, because there was a time where I couldn't find hardly anything about Saint Joseph written, or prayer cards or anything, hymns. I couldn't find anything for Saint Joseph. And now it's like we're ambushed with all this beautiful stuff. So it is a renaissance, it's a rebirth. And I think heaven is rejoicing at this. Second question was, how does Joseph teach us simplicity? Because he, aside from being fugitives and running away from King Herod's soldiers and having to live in a foreign land and all that drama, the other years were relatively quiet. It was just family life, nothing crazy, just family life, working with your son. Your wife is there as well. You're observing the religious holidays. You're, just a domestic church life is what St. Joseph lived. And it was simple. And also the fact that he was hidden for so long maybe teaches us, because he didn't have so many flattering artworks or all these hymns and all this stuff, that devotion to him was simpler, because there wasn't much about it. So it's like, hey, Saint Joseph, pray for me, a sinner, So it was simple, and he wasn't a complicated man. I mean, we like to say average Joe all the time, and that he was an average Joe, but with lots of grace. But he wasn't a complicated man. He was a carpenter. He lived by the fruit of his labors. For Adam, labor was a pain. It was a punishment for his sin. For Joseph, it was a sanctifying grace to be able to work and pray and commune with God, and just keep it simple. Like, we can have a million litanies and memorares and prayers and devotions and all these things that crowd around us, like, oh, I have to pray this many times on this many days, and that sometimes you lose the focus of what you're actually doing. You're doing it just to get it out of the way because it's cumbersome. But you have to start simple, with your prayer life. You have to approach God, the Holy Family, as a child. They say, be as a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, that couldn't be more true. We have to approach Saint Joseph like, you know what, I want to be your son. I want to be a loyal son of yours, so that I could get to know your spouse and Christ. So we could be theologians. That's another thing. I got a message saying, why don't you have any scholarly books written about St. Joseph, academic books? I'm like, I'm a college dropout. I'm nobody. But that doesn't impact my faith in a bad way. I think it saves it in a way, because I could have all the knowledge of the world in my head. I'm not going to have a good spiritual life necessarily. So you have to keep it simple and humble. And, that way you're able to take things in, at a normal pace, instead of being bombarded with all this academic stuff that you have to look up what all these words mean. So just keep it simple. Like that's all we can do, because Saint Joseph was simple. That's it, I guess. I don't know what else to say.
Well said, Joe. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't remember seeing, PhD behind the name of Saint Joseph. And the only real important initials don't come after your name. They only come before your name. So we need to keep it simple, make sure we have that ST period before our names after we die. Like Mother Angelica said, the only tragedy in this life is to have not been a saint. So we got to try to be simple and keep that in front of our eyes, to just try to be a saint. And keep in mind, like, I love the quote from Saint Jose Maria Escrivá. He said, a saint is a sinner who keeps on trying. So
Amen.
What you said, Joe, reminded me that, me thinking about St. Joseph for a while, if I were to distill it into three things, I think what comes to my mind is fatherhood, husbandry, and simplicity. And a follow-up question to what you said on simplicity, but first, since we're sitting here in the carpenter shop, I'm not the best listener. I'm trying to improve on that. But did I hear you say that work was a punishment for Adam? It came like after the fall, or did I mishear you?
No, it was a punishment for Adam, but for Saint Joseph, it was like sanctifying grace. It was a pleasure for him to work. So a lot of saints attest to that.
So I'll have to jump in here. I think you might be wrong on that, or hopefully I'm wrong on it. But I read about this recently, and work was actually already assigned to the first humans by God before they fell, before original sin. So work is something that we're already supposed to be doing. Our Father is working. God worked for 6 days of creation, then he rested on the seventh. So the only difference was that work became drudgery, and like we would have to sweat later, and we didn't like it. But before that, we liked it. It was like a beautiful thing. It was like a gift that we could offer up, like a priest, offer up our work to God, who himself works. So correct me if I'm wrong. We can put some comments later. Let's both do our homework on this. But I think that work was part of the original plan, like, Saint Benedict said, ora et labora, work and prayer. Just like the very beginning in the garden, we're to work and pray. And then, sin got in the way and distorted all that stuff. And now we have to untwist it by God's grace. Christ, who redeems everything, even work. So now we can redeem our work like it was in the part of the original plan, and offer it up in the right way as a fragrant offering to God. So
can I just read a quote, a real quick quote?
Sure.
Okay, so this is in my book, and it's from Venerable Maria da Grida. She's not a saint yet, but she's on the way. And she said, Holy Joseph ordered his occupations and his work to most worthily provide for the divine child and his mother, as well as for himself. That which in other sons of Adam is considered a punishment and a hardship was to this holy patriarch a great happiness. For while others were condemned to sustain their natural life by the labor of their hands in the sweat of their brows, Saint Joseph was blessed and consoled beyond measure to know that he had been chosen by his labor and sweat to support God himself and his mother. So that's kind of where I make that assumption that labor was seen as like a punishment initially, but St. Joseph, on the other hand, loved it because he was supporting God with the slavers. So, I mean, that's just one quote from a venerable. Like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe she's wrong, but this is what stuck out to me.
I see your quote by a venerable, and I raise you a quote by a saint.
Okay.
I have it in my book. I don't remember where. I think it's in the chapter day on St. Joseph, the model workers. And I talk about that. And I quote, the saint who wrote the book on work, St. Jose Maria Escrivá, who he started the work of God, and how we can, we're all called to be saints, like Vatican II says, right? The call of sanctity within the laity. And he focused in specifically within our work, which most of us, that's probably like, 75% of our average day is going to work. And that can be a prayer. We can sanctify that work, and we can sanctify ourselves in that work, and we can sanctify others through that work. So I'll have to revisit it. Let's do this. Let's bet a Coke on it. All right.
Sure.
All right. So let's bet a Coke on it. We can explore this later. We are now definitely out of time, so I'm gonna have to go. So thank you so much, friends, for being here with us today on the Cup of Joe with Joe Rodrigues, modern day apostle of St. Joe. Please go to his YouTube channel, get his books, like, share, and subscribe to his channel today. We'll put a link in the description below. And if you have any other questions for Joe, which I think we might have him a third time's the charm. So if you have any other questions you'd like to ask Joe, please put them in the comment section below. So remember, friends, as always, go to Joseph. Peace.
Amen.
Thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Okay, go to your meeting now. Thanks a lot.
All right, buddy. Peace.
All right, bye. Peace.